their leader and they want you.
Quick?
Okay!
Viso su con comae.
Non li pica...
Stop manhandling me, you big weirdo!
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
If you think the Minions have already done everything possible, Minions and Monsters takes that idea and throws it completely out the window. Instead of simply giving these little yellow characters another villain to follow, the movie places them in a completely different world. One filled with old Hollywood glamour, silent movies, strange creatures, and a ridiculous dream that somehow turns into a global disaster. The story takes us back to the 1920s, long before the Minions ever became familiar faces in the Despicable Me timeline. This time, they are not trying to help a supervillain take over the world. They want something much stranger. They want to make a monster movie. The idea sounds simple, but with the Minions involved, nothing ever stays simple for very long. Their fascination with movies becomes the starting point for an adventure that mixes classic Hollywood comedy with monster movie chaos. The film introduces a young filmmaker named James, who dreams of making movies and sees the Minions as the perfect group to help him bring his ideas to life. The problem is that the Minions have absolutely no understanding of how a normal movie production is supposed to work. They are energetic, unpredictable, and more interested in doing things their own way than following instructions. What begins as an innocent attempt to create entertainment quickly becomes something much bigger. One of the most interesting things about this story is the way it uses the silent film era. The movie gets to play with an old-fashioned version of Hollywood where filmmaking was still developing and audiences were fascinated by larger-than-life characters and frightening creatures. The Minions fit into this environment surprisingly well because their physical comedy does not depend heavily on dialogue. Their expressions, movements, accidents, and completely ridiculous reactions become a major part of the humor. It almost feels like the filmmakers are taking the classic language of silent comedy and giving it a modern animated twist. James becomes especially important because his dream gives the story an emotional center. He does not simply want to make a movie for fame. He genuinely loves filmmaking and wants to prove that he can create something people will remember. The Minions, meanwhile, see the whole thing as one giant opportunity to have fun. That difference creates plenty of situations where James is trying to control the production while the Minions are doing exactly the opposite. Then the story introduces Gumi, a strange creature who becomes one of the most unexpected parts of the adventure. Instead of simply treating the monster as something terrifying that needs to be defeated, the movie gives the Minions a chance to actually connect with one. And because these creatures are basically incapable of behaving normally around anything unusual, their relationship with Gumi becomes a source of both comedy and heart. The movie's central idea is built around a simple mistake with enormous consequences. The Minions want a real monster for their movie, and eventually they get much more than they expected. Their search leads them towards something supernatural, and before they realize what they have done, actual monsters are unleashed into the world. Suddenly, the fictional disaster they wanted to put on screen becomes a real disaster happening around them. That change is what pushes the story from a Hollywood comedy into a full-scale adventure. The Minions are no longer trying to make people believe that monsters exist. They now have to deal with the fact that monsters actually exist, and worse, they are responsible for bringing them into the world. For characters who normally create chaos without worrying too much about the consequences, this gives the story a new direction. They finally have to face the results of one of their biggest mistakes. The supporting cast also gives the movie a different flavor. The voice cast includes Allison Janney, Christoph Waltz, Jeff Bridges, Jesse Eisenberg, Zoe Deutsch, Bobby Moynihan, Phil Lamar, Trey Parker, and Pierre Coffin, who once again provides the voices of the Minions. Each performer brings a different energy to the world, helping the movie balance its exaggerated comedy with the larger adventure surrounding the characters. Christoph Waltz and Jeff Bridges are especially interesting additions because their presence fits perfectly with the film's old Hollywood setting. Their characters help expand the world beyond the Minions themselves, making the story feel more like a movie about the birth of an entire entertainment industry rather than another simple Minions adventure. The human characters have their own ambitions, while the Minions seem to operate according to a completely different set of rules, and that is where much of the movie's humor comes from. Everyone else is trying to understand what is happening, while the Minions are usually the reason it is happening in the first place. They can turn a small problem into a huge disaster within seconds, and somehow they still manage to look completely innocent afterward. The animation also gives the filmmakers plenty of room to experiment. Because the story takes place in the 1920s, the movie can recreate the look and atmosphere of early cinema while still using the exaggerated visual style associated with the Minions franchise. Old movie sets, classic Hollywood imagery, monster laboratories, strange creatures, and chaotic action all become part of the same visual playground. But underneath all the comedy, there is another idea running through the story. The movie is about people who want to create something. James wants to make films. The Minions want to be part of the filmmaking process. The studio executives want successful entertainment. And the monsters become the unpredictable element that nobody can control. In that sense, the movie is not only making fun of Hollywood, it is also celebrating the strange creativity that has always been part of filmmaking. That is probably why the setting works so well. The Minions have always been characters who accidentally become involved in major historical moments, but this time the movie gives them a place where their natural love of chaos actually feels appropriate. Hollywood itself is presented as a world where impossible ideas can become reality, which makes it the perfect environment for them. Of course, the biggest problem arrives when the monsters escape. What began as a movie project becomes a threat to everyone around them. The Minions suddenly have to stop thinking about their next joke or their next stunt and start thinking about how to fix what they have caused. And that is where the adventure really begins. The story now becomes a race against time. The monsters are loose, the situation is getting worse, and the characters who created the problem have to find a way to solve it. Instead of running away and leaving everyone else to deal with the consequences, the Minions decide to help. Their methods may be completely ridiculous, but their intentions are genuine. That shift is important because it gives the movie an emotional payoff. The Minions are chaotic by nature, but they are also loyal. When things become serious, they tend to stand together. Their friendship is one of the reasons audiences have stayed connected to these characters for so many years. And Minions and Monsters uses that quality in a story that puts them in a situation far bigger than anything they expected. As the monster threat grows, the characters have to work together despite their differences. James has to trust the Minions. The Minions have to learn that not every problem can be solved by making things more chaotic. And the people around them have to accept that the strange yellow creatures might actually be the only ones capable of saving the day. The movie's trailer gives viewers a good idea of this tone without revealing everything. It presents Hollywood as a place where the Minions become fascinated with movies and then shows how their attempt to create the ultimate monster film goes completely wrong. The central tagline, "Hollywood has a monster problem," perfectly captures the basic joke behind the story. The Minions came to Hollywood looking for movie magic, but instead they found something that was far too real. The marketing also emphasized that this is an entirely new chapter for the franchise. Rather than relying heavily on familiar villains, the movie introduces new characters and a new setting while keeping the Minions at the center. That makes it easier for the story to stand on its own while still feeling connected to the larger Despicable Me universe. The theatrical release was scheduled for July 1, 2026, giving the movie a major summer launch. It also premiered at the Annecy International Animation Film Festival before its wider theatrical release, which was another indication of how much attention the filmmakers were putting behind this new entry. What makes the release especially interesting is the timing. The Minions franchise has already become one of the biggest animated properties in modern Hollywood, so a new movie featuring these characters automatically arrives with a huge audience waiting for it. But instead of simply repeating the formula from previous films, Minions and Monsters tries to give the characters a new playground. And honestly, that may be exactly what the franchise needed. After multiple movies, the biggest challenge for any long-running animated series is finding a way to make familiar characters feel fresh again. You can only introduce so many villains and repeat the same basic structure before audiences start predicting everything. By moving the Minions into 1920s Hollywood and surrounding them with monsters, filmmakers have created a setup where almost anything can happen. The monster concept also gives the movie a chance to explore a different type of comedy. The strange thing about a movie like this is that the biggest surprises do not always come from the monsters themselves. Sometimes, they come from watching ordinary people realize that the world they thought they understood is no longer following the rules they were used to. That is exactly what begins to happen as James and the Minions find themselves caught between Hollywood ambition and a situation that has become far more dangerous than any film set could handle. James has spent so much of his life dreaming about creating something unforgettable that, at first, The growing chaos almost feels like the opportunity he has been waiting for. There are real creatures, real danger, and situations that no filmmaker could ever recreate with special effects. But there is a major difference between filming danger and actually being trapped inside it. Once the situation becomes impossible to control, James has to stop thinking like a filmmaker and start thinking like someone who wants to survive. The minions, naturally, take a completely different approach. They do not seem to understand the seriousness of the situation in the same way everyone else does. Even when things are falling apart around them, they continue reacting with their usual mixture of excitement, confusion, and confidence. That attitude can be frustrating for the people trying to control the situation. But it also becomes one of the reasons they are able to keep moving forward when everyone else starts losing hope. There is something almost ironic about the way the minions handle danger. They are not brave because they have no fear. Most of the time, they simply do not have enough common sense to understand how afraid they should be. A giant creature can appear in front of them, and instead of immediately running away, they may stare at it with curiosity. Sometimes they try to communicate with it. Sometimes they accidentally make the situation worse. And sometimes, completely by accident, they discover the one thing that can actually help. That unpredictability becomes extremely important as the story expands. The people around James begin realizing that the monster problem is not something that can be solved by simply locking a creature away or sending someone after it. The situation has already spread beyond the original plan. What was supposed to be controlled entertainment has become an unpredictable chain reaction, and every time the characters think they have finally figured things out, another problem appears. This is where the movie can really take advantage of its setting. A 1920s Hollywood environment gives the filmmakers plenty of opportunities to turn familiar locations into something completely unexpected. A movie studio can become a battlefield. A quiet street can suddenly become a place of panic. A glamorous film set can be destroyed in seconds by a creature that does not care about the expensive equipment surrounding it. For James, watching his dream collapse in front of him is painful. He wanted to create something people would remember, but he never imagined that being remembered might happen because his production accidentally unleashed monsters. There is also an interesting contrast between James and the minions. James wants control. The minions are practically allergic to control. He thinks about planning shots, managing productions, and creating something carefully. The minions think about whatever is happening in front of them at that exact moment. Their personalities clash constantly, but that conflict also makes their partnership entertaining. James has the ambition and the vision. The minions bring the completely unpredictable energy that keeps turning his plans upside down. Eventually, though, James begins to understand that the minions' unpredictability may not always be a weakness. Sometimes, being unable to follow a normal plan can be exactly what allows them to discover a solution nobody else considered. That becomes especially important when the characters encounter situations where traditional methods simply do not work. The creatures are unlike anything they have dealt with before, and the people trying to contain them are forced to think differently. Meanwhile, the relationship between the minions and Gumi continues to develop. What initially seems like another strange encounter gradually becomes something more meaningful. The minions do not see Gumi simply as a monster. They see a creature that is different, confusing, and sometimes frightening, but also capable of showing loyalty and affection. That connection creates one of the movie's more interesting questions. Is Gumi really the enemy, or is the real danger coming from the people who do not understand these creatures? The movie does not need to answer that question immediately. Instead, it allows the audience to discover the truth alongside the characters. Every new encounter adds another piece to the puzzle, and the longer the story continues, the more complicated the situation becomes. This also gives the supporting characters more to do. They are not simply standing around waiting for the minions to solve everything. Each person has their own reaction to the growing crisis. Some want to fight, others want to escape. Some are convinced that the creatures must be destroyed before they cause even more damage. And then there are people who see an opportunity. That is where the story's Hollywood setting becomes more than just a visual backdrop. The film industry is built around turning attention into success, and a monster crisis can attract an enormous amount of attention. Some characters begin seeing the creatures not only as a threat but also as something that could potentially be exploited. That idea creates another layer of conflict because not everyone involved wants the same thing. James wants to protect his dream and the people around him. The minions want to help their friends, even if they do not fully understand what is happening. Others may be thinking about fame, money, or control. Suddenly, the monsters are not the only problem. Human ambition becomes part of the danger. This is where the story can move beyond simple comedy and create a stronger sense of tension. The audience knows that the creatures are dangerous, but they also know that some of the humans are making decisions based on selfish motives. When those two forces collide, the consequences can become much worse than either side expected. The minions are caught in the middle, and somehow, they are still trying to make a movie. That running joke continues to give the story its identity. Even when the situation becomes serious, there is always the possibility that a minion will misunderstand what is happening and turn a tense moment into complete chaos. But the comedy does not erase the danger. If anything, it makes the serious moments stand out more. When the minions are laughing and causing trouble, the movie feels light and playful. When one of their friends is in genuine danger, the mood changes quickly. That contrast helps the audience become more invested in the characters. The minions may be small, but their loyalty has always been one of their biggest strengths. They do not abandon their friends simply because things become difficult. That becomes especially clear when the situation reaches a point where running away would be the easiest option. Instead, the group decides that they have to help fix the mess they created. Of course, their definition of help is not exactly the same as everyone else's. Their plan involves improvisation, questionable decisions, and more than a little destruction. But it works. At least sometimes. As the threat grows, the characters begin moving toward the realization that defeating the monsters may not be the real solution. They need to understand where the creatures came from, why they appeared, and what is actually causing them to behave the way they do. That investigation takes the story into a much more mysterious direction. The further they go, the more they discover that the creatures are connected to something much older and stranger than their original movie project. The minions may have accidentally opened a door to something they were never supposed to disturb. And closing that door will not be easy. James now has to make a choice. He can continue trying to protect his dream of becoming a filmmaker, or he can accept that his original dream has changed completely. For most people, that would be devastating. But James slowly realizes that filmmaking was never really about controlling every detail. It was about creating something that could make people feel something. And ironically, his biggest disaster may become the most important experience of his life. The minions teach him something he could never have learned from a textbook or a movie set. Sometimes the best stories come from moments you never planned. That does not mean the disaster is a good thing. It simply means that something meaningful can still come from a terrible mistake. As the group moves closer to the heart of the problem, the relationship between James and the minions begins to change as well. At the beginning, he sees them as unpredictable assistants who constantly make his job harder. Now he starts seeing them as partners. They may not understand filmmaking, they may not understand monsters, they may not even understand half of the instructions they are given, but they understand friendship. And that is enough. The final stages of the adventure begin to bring all these relationships together. The humans, the minions, and the creatures are no longer separate parts of the story. Their decisions are affecting one another, and one mistake can change everything. The minions finally find themselves facing a problem that cannot be solved by simply running in another direction. They have to stand their ground, and that is easier said than done when the enemy is several times larger than them. Their first attempts are messy. Some plans fail immediately. Others work for a few seconds before falling apart. There are moments when it looks like the entire situation is hopeless. But then the minions do what they always do. They improvise. One of them notices something the others missed. Another turns a completely useless object into something unexpectedly helpful. A third minion does something so reckless that everyone assumes it will end badly. And somehow, it creates an opening. That opening gives the others a chance. The movie uses these moments to remind us why the minions remain such popular characters. They are not superheroes. They do not have special powers. They are not brilliant strategists. They are simply persistent. They keep trying, even when their first plan fails. They try again. And when the second plan fails, they somehow find a third. That persistence becomes the key to the final confrontation. The monsters may have the size and strength advantage, but the minions have something much harder to predict. They have each other. As everything reaches its breaking point, James finally understands that he cannot save his dream by pretending nothing happened. The only way forward is to accept the consequences and help fix the damage. That realization changes him. He is no longer simply the young filmmaker who wants to make the perfect movie. He becomes someone willing to risk everything to protect the people who helped him get there. And that is where the movie's emotional side becomes strongest. Because underneath all the monsters, jokes, destruction, and Hollywood references, the story is really about discovering what matters when the plan you built your life around completely falls apart. James learns that success is not always about getting exactly what you wanted. Sometimes, it is about discovering something better after everything goes wrong. For the Minions, the lesson is much simpler. They probably do not learn much at all, but they do manage to help save the day. And honestly, that is probably enough. As the final confrontation approaches, the world around them has changed dramatically from the quiet Hollywood dream James imagined at the beginning. The streets are no longer just places for movie sets. The studio is no longer just a workplace. The monsters are no longer fictional characters. Everything has become real. And now the people who created this impossible situation have to be the ones who end it. The question is no longer whether the Minions can make a monster movie. The question is whether they can survive being inside one. And considering everything that has happened so far, there is only one thing we can be certain of. Whatever happens next, it is not going to go according to plan. By this point, the situation has become much bigger than anyone originally imagined. What started as an ambitious filmmaking project has turned into a dangerous confrontation between humans and creatures that were never supposed to exist in their world. But the most important part is that the characters are finally beginning to understand that simply fighting whatever scares them is not going to solve the problem. For James, that realization comes at exactly the wrong time. Everything he worked toward seems to be slipping away. The movie he dreamed about is no longer a production. The people who were supposed to help him are now dealing with a crisis, and the strange creatures that once seemed like an incredible opportunity have become a threat that could destroy everything around them. Yet James refuses to walk away. That decision may seem strange considering how badly everything has gone, but it tells us something important about his character. He has spent years believing that making movies means creating something people have never seen before. Now, standing in the middle of an actual monster crisis, he has the opportunity to do exactly that. The only problem is that nobody is watching from a safe theater anymore. Everyone is part of the story. The Minions are especially difficult to control during this stage of the adventure. Their energy has become almost impossible to contain. While the adults around them are trying to understand the situation logically, the Minions are following instinct. They notice small details that everyone else ignores, and because they do not think in conventional ways, they sometimes come up with ideas that would never occur to anyone else. Of course, not every idea is useful. Some are completely ridiculous. Some make the situation worse. And a few are so dangerous that even the other Minions seem to realize they have gone too far. But every once in a while, one of those ridiculous ideas actually works. That unpredictability gives the story a constant sense of movement. You never quite know what the Minions will do next, and because they are surrounded by creatures that are equally unpredictable, the entire adventure feels like it could explode into chaos at any moment. The biggest challenge is understanding the monsters themselves. Until now, most of the characters have been reacting to them based on fear. They see a giant creature and immediately assume it must be dangerous. They see something strange and assume it needs to be stopped. But Gumi changes that perspective. Gumi is not simply another creature causing destruction. The connection with the Minions shows that monsters can have personalities, emotions, and even their own reasons for behaving the way they do. That realization forces James to rethink everything. Maybe the problem is not that monsters exist. Maybe the problem is that nobody understands them. That distinction becomes extremely important because the people who want to destroy the creatures are acting from fear, while the Minions are approaching them with curiosity. And curiosity is something the Minions have in unlimited supply. They are not afraid to walk towards something everyone else is running away from. They want to know what it is, what it does, and whether it can become their friend. That attitude creates several unexpected moments where the Minions discover information that the more experienced characters completely missed. One of the most interesting consequences is that the creatures begin reacting differently to the Minions. Instead of immediately attacking, some of them seem confused by these tiny yellow figures who behave as though nothing is unusual. The Minions do not treat them like monsters. They treat them like potential friends. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. Meanwhile, the people trying to control the situation become more desperate. They need a solution quickly because the longer the creatures remain free, the greater the potential damage becomes. That pressure also creates conflict between the characters. Not everyone agrees on what should happen next. Some believe the creatures should be destroyed before they become even more dangerous. Others believe there must be another answer. James finds himself caught between these two sides. He understands the fear because he has seen what the creatures can do. But after spending time with Gumi and the minions, he also realizes that destroying everything they do not understand may create an even bigger problem. This is where the story becomes more than a simple monster adventure. It becomes a story about fear. People are often afraid of things they cannot explain, and when fear takes over, people stop looking for answers. They start looking for something to blame. The creatures become an easy target. The minions, meanwhile, are almost the complete opposite. They do not have enough understanding to be afraid in the normal way. That might sound like a weakness, but in this situation, it becomes their advantage. While everyone else is thinking about how to defeat the monsters, the minions are trying to figure out how to communicate with them. Their methods are, of course, completely absurd. They use gestures, they make noises, they offer food, they imitate the creatures. At one point, their attempt to communicate becomes so ridiculous that it looks like they are performing another movie instead of trying to prevent a disaster. But the creatures respond. That moment changes the direction of the story. For the first time, the characters see evidence that the monsters can understand them. The creatures are not simply mindless forces of destruction. There is something behind their behavior. Something has frightened them. Something has brought them here. And something may be controlling the situation from behind the scenes. That possibility raises the stakes. If the creatures are reacting to another force, then destroying them would never solve the real problem. The characters need to find the source, and that means going deeper into the mystery. James and the minions begin following clues that lead them away from the familiar world of Hollywood and towards something much stranger. Their journey becomes less about making a movie and more about discovering what they accidentally awakened. The further they go, the more the story begins connecting the past with the present. The creatures are not random. Their arrival has a reason. And the people who understand that history may know far more than they have admitted. This is where some of the human characters become increasingly suspicious. James starts questioning the motives of people around him. Why were certain experiments being conducted? Why was so much interest placed on creating the perfect monster? Why did the situation seem almost too convenient for some people? And most importantly, who benefits from all this chaos? These questions turn the adventure into something closer to a mystery. The minions are still mostly unaware of the bigger picture, but they keep stumbling across important clues. One of the funniest parts of the story is that the minions may actually be solving the mystery without realizing they are solving anything. They touch things they should not touch. They open doors they should leave closed. They follow sounds that everyone else considers dangerous. And because of those mistakes, they discover information that the adults would never have found. This gives the story a classic adventure feeling. Every location contains another piece of the puzzle. Every creature has something to reveal. And every mistake brings the characters closer to the truth. But the closer they get, the more dangerous things become. The people who want to keep the truth hidden begin taking action. Now James and the minions are not only dealing with monsters, they are dealing with humans who are willing to do almost anything to protect their secrets. That changes the nature of the conflict completely. The creatures are dangerous because they are powerful. The humans are dangerous because they are intelligent. And the minions are caught between both sides. For once, their usual chaos is not enough. They need a real plan. James begins putting together everything they have learned. The creatures respond to certain sounds. Gumi behaves differently from the others. Some of the monsters seem frightened rather than aggressive, and the strange events all appear connected to one central source. If they can reach that source, they may be able to stop the creatures without destroying them. But getting there will not be easy. The path is guarded. The characters are being watched, and the people who created the original problem now know that James is getting too close to the truth. The pressure begins building. James realizes that there may not be enough time. If they wait too long, the creatures could spread beyond their current location. If that happens, containing the problem may become impossible. So they decide to move. The minions prepare themselves in the only way they know how. They gather whatever objects they think might be useful. Some of those objects make sense, others absolutely do not. James looks at their equipment and immediately realizes that this is going to be a disaster. But there is no other choice. They have to go. The journey toward the source of the problem becomes one of the most dangerous parts of the story. The characters encounter creatures they have never seen before. Some attack immediately, others simply observe them. A few seem almost curious. The minions constantly find themselves in situations where one wrong move could end everything. Yet somehow, they keep moving. Their friendship becomes their biggest advantage. When one minion gets separated from the group, the others do not continue without him. They turn around. They search. They take risks. Because for them, staying together matters more than reaching the destination quickly. That emotional connection is important because it reminds us that these characters are not just comic relief. They genuinely care about one another. And that makes their mistakes easier to forgive. Eventually, the group reaches a place that changes everything. They discover evidence that the monsters were not created simply for entertainment. Someone had been trying to understand them. Someone had been experimenting with forces they did not fully understand. And somewhere along the way, that research crossed a line. The consequences are now spreading into the world. James realizes that the movie they were trying to make was never really the beginning of the story. It was only the latest chapter. The creatures existed long before the cameras arrived. And now the people who brought them into the spotlight have to decide what to do with them. That discovery leaves James with an uncomfortable question. If he had never wanted to make a monster movie, would any of this have happened? He knows the answer is complicated. The creatures were already there, but his ambition helped expose them. That guilt begins weighing on him. The minions notice. They may not understand every detail, but they understand that James is blaming himself. So they do what they do best. They stay beside him. No speech is necessary. No dramatic explanation is needed. They simply remain there. And for James, that is enough to remind him that the situation is not about his failed movie anymore. It is about the people and creatures standing beside him. The final solution may still be far away, but for the first time, James understands what he has to do. He does not need to become the hero of a movie. He needs to help everyone survive the story they are already living, and that means confronting the person responsible for everything. The mystery finally has a direction. The monsters are not the true enemy. The real danger is the person who believed they could control something they never truly understood. Now James, the minions, and Gumi have one final obstacle standing between them and the truth. And this time, running away is not an option, because if they fail, the monster problem will no longer belong to Hollywood. It will belong to everyone. The closer James and the minions get to the truth, the more they realize that the situation was never as simple as it first appeared. There is a difference between creating something dangerous by accident and deliberately trying to control something powerful. And now, they are beginning to understand that someone may have crossed that line long before they ever arrived. James is no longer thinking about the movie he wanted to make. His attention is completely focused on the strange discoveries surrounding the creatures. Every piece of evidence seems to point toward a larger plan, and the more he learns, the more uncomfortable he becomes with the idea that the monster outbreak might not have been an accident at all. The minions, meanwhile, are following along. Without fully understanding the seriousness of what they have uncovered, they are still fascinated by everything around them. Strange machines, hidden rooms, mysterious objects, and unfamiliar creatures all attract their attention. Every few minutes, one of them finds something interesting and immediately wants to investigate it. James repeatedly tries to stop them. Sometimes he succeeds. Most of the time, he does not. But one of those investigations leads to something important. The minions discover evidence that reveals how the creatures were being studied. The work was not simply about understanding monsters. There was an attempt to learn how they behaved, how they reacted to certain environments, and whether their abilities could somehow be controlled. That discovery changes the way James sees the entire situation. Someone wanted to understand the creatures for a reason, and that reason may have had nothing to do with making movies. The Hollywood production may simply have provided the perfect cover. The more James thinks about it, the more suspicious the entire situation becomes. The timing of certain events, the people involved, and the strange equipment they have encountered all begin fitting together. The minions have accidentally walked into something much bigger than themselves. But instead of running away, they continue moving forward. That is partly because they do not understand how dangerous the situation is, but it is also because they have become emotionally attached to Gumi. They no longer want to see the creatures treated as disposable monsters. Gumi seems to understand them too. There is a growing trust between them, even though their communication is far from normal. They cannot have a traditional conversation, but they do not really need one. Expressions, gestures, and actions tell them enough. Gumi has become part of their group, and that means the minions are not going to leave without their new friend. This creates another problem. If the people responsible for the experiments discover that Gumi is cooperating with the minions, they may see the creature as even more valuable. James understands that immediately. They cannot allow Gumi to be captured. The group therefore has to move carefully through the facility while avoiding the people searching for them. This part of the story creates a completely different kind of tension. The minions are normally loud and impossible to miss, so trying to sneak around quietly is almost impossible for them. They attempt to hide. They fail. They try to stay silent. Someone always makes a noise. They attempt to act normal. That is probably their biggest mistake of all. Yet their failures create opportunities. When the people searching for them become distracted by the minions' ridiculous behavior, James and Gumi are able to move deeper into the facility. Eventually, they find a room containing records that reveal something even more disturbing. The creatures were not all discovered at the same time. Some had been known for years. Others appeared after experiments were conducted, and the research suggests that the creatures may be connected to something beyond normal science. That is where the story begins blending its monster elements with something more mysterious. James realizes that there are forces involved here that cannot simply be explained by machines and experiments. The people behind the research believed they could control everything. They were wrong, and now everyone else is paying the price. The consequences become obvious when the facility suddenly begins shaking. Something has happened outside. The creatures are reacting. The minions freeze for a moment. Then they start running. James follows them. The group reaches an opening where they can see the scale of the problem. There are more creatures than they expected, and they are moving toward the city. This is no longer a contained incident. It is spreading. The people who wanted to keep everything under control have lost control completely. Panic begins spreading among the humans. Some try to escape. Others attempt to fight. James realizes that neither option will solve the real problem. If they attack the creatures without understanding what is causing them to behave this way, they could make everything worse. Gumi seems to sense something that the others cannot. The creature looks toward a distant location. James follows its gaze. There is something there, a source, a signal. Whatever is influencing the creatures appears to be coming from one central point. If they can reach it, they might be able to stop the outbreak. But getting there means crossing through the middle of the chaos. The minions are ready, or at least they believe they are. They gather whatever equipment they can carry. James tries to organize them. He gives instructions. The minions nod confidently. Then they immediately do something completely different. James sighs. At this point, he has learned that trying to control them is pointless. Instead, he decides to work with their instincts. If they are going to be unpredictable anyway, they might as well use that unpredictability as an advantage. The plan becomes simple. Reach the source, find out what is controlling the creatures, shut it down. And somehow get everyone out alive. It sounds straightforward. It is anything but. The journey through the city becomes increasingly dangerous. Creatures are everywhere. Buildings are damaged. People are running in every direction. The once glamorous world of Hollywood has become almost unrecognizable. James sees movie posters, theater signs, and studio buildings surrounded by chaos. There is something strangely fitting about it. The place where people created fictional monsters is now being destroyed by real ones. For James, the irony is impossible to ignore. He wanted to create a movie that audiences would never forget. Now he is living through a story that no audience could ever imagine. The minions, however, are strangely excited. They see the destruction and immediately recognize the possibility of adventure. James has to remind them that this is not a movie. Nobody is going to yell cut. Nobody is going to reset the scene. If something goes wrong, there may not be another chance. That finally gets their attention. For a brief moment, the minions become serious. They understand that their friends are in danger, and they understand that this may be the biggest challenge they have ever faced. The group continues forward. They eventually reach a location where the signal appears to be strongest. But before they can enter, someone is waiting for them. The person responsible James immediately recognizes that this confrontation has been coming. The villain does not see the creatures as living beings. They see them as resources, something that can be studied, controlled, and potentially turned into something profitable. That belief is what created the entire problem. The villain argues that humanity has always advanced by taking risks. According to them, discovering these creatures was simply another scientific breakthrough. The fact that things went wrong is treated as an unfortunate side effect. James strongly disagrees. There is a moment where the two sides finally confront the real issue. Progress means nothing if you are willing to destroy everything around you to achieve it. The minions may not understand the philosophical argument, but they understand one thing perfectly. The villain is threatening their friends. That is enough. The confrontation quickly becomes chaotic. The villain attempts to activate the system controlling the creatures. The creatures begin responding. Gumi reacts immediately. The minions rush toward the controls. Everything happens at once. James tries to shut down the system while the minions attempt to distract the creatures. The villain fights back. And suddenly the entire facility becomes a battlefield. Machines begin malfunctioning. Lights flash. Doors slam shut. The creatures roar. The minions run in every direction. And James realizes they have only a few moments left. He sees the control system. There is one way to shut it down, but doing so could also destroy the facility. Everyone needs to get out. Now. James gives the signal. The minions understand. For once, they follow the plan. They grab Gumi and begin moving toward the exit. James stays behind for a moment. He needs to make sure the system is completely disabled. The villain tries to stop him. The two struggle. The machine begins overheating. James finally manages to reach the controls. He shuts everything down. For a second, there is complete silence. Then the entire facility begins collapsing. James runs. The minions are already outside. They are shouting for him. He reaches the exit just as the building begins falling apart behind him. Everyone watches as the structure disappears into a cloud of dust. The signal is gone. The creatures stop. For the first time since the outbreak began, everything becomes quiet. But the story is not finished yet. The creatures are still there. The city is damaged. The people are frightened. And nobody knows exactly what will happen next. James looks at the minions. They are covered in dirt. Their clothes are damaged. They look exhausted. But they are smiling. They survived. Gumi is still with them. He is still with them. And that may be the most important thing of all. The immediate threat is gone. But James knows the consequences will remain. His movie is destroyed. The studio is damaged. His original dream is completely different now. Yet strangely, he does not feel like he failed. He has learned something that he never expected. A good story does not always come from perfect planning. Sometimes it comes from accidents. Sometimes it comes from mistakes. And sometimes it comes from finding yourself in a situation you never wanted but refusing to give up. The minions may have caused the chaos, but they also helped bring everyone together. They showed James that creativity is not always about control. Sometimes it is about adapting. Sometimes it is about taking the unexpected and turning it into something meaningful. As the survivors begin rebuilding their lives, James starts thinking about what comes next. Maybe the movie he originally wanted to make is gone forever. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. Because now he has a story nobody could have written. A real adventure. A real friendship. And a group of tiny yellow creatures who somehow turned a simple dream into the most unbelievable experience of his life. The minions look toward the damaged Hollywood skyline. Then one of them suddenly gets an idea. James immediately knows that look. Whatever they are thinking, it probably means trouble. The others gather around. Gumi watches them. And James can only smile. After everything they have been through, one thing has become obvious. The minions are never going to stop looking for the next adventure. And if there is one lesson they have learned from this entire disaster, it is that monsters are not always the scariest thing in the world. Sometimes, the real danger is simply giving the minions too much freedom, because sooner or later, they are going to find something else. And when they do, nobody is going to be ready. For the first time since the chaos began, the world around James feels almost normal again. The creatures are no longer attacking the city. The strange signal has disappeared, and the people who were trapped in the middle of the disaster can finally breathe. But normal does not mean everything has returned to the way it was. Hollywood has been left with scars. Buildings are damaged, production equipment has been destroyed, and the movie industry is suddenly dealing with a story that nobody could have prepared for. The people who witnessed the creatures are telling different versions of what happened, and before long, rumors begin spreading faster than the truth. Some people say the monsters were an experiment. Others believe they came from somewhere beyond the known world. A few insist the entire event was staged as some kind of publicity stunt. James knows the truth is much stranger than any of those explanations. But telling people exactly what happened would create another problem. Nobody would believe him. And even if they did, the questions would never stop. Where did the creatures come from? Why did they appear? Who created the technology used to influence them? And most importantly, are there more creatures still out there? James does not have answers to all of those questions, neither do the minions. But one thing is clear, the story is not completely over. Gumi remains with them, and its presence creates a strange new situation. The creature cannot simply be released into the city and expected to live normally. People would panic the moment they saw it. So James and the minions have to find somewhere safe. That turns out to be much harder than expected. The minions want to keep Gumi close. But they also know that hiding a giant creature is not exactly an easy task. Their first attempt involves taking Gumi somewhere they believe nobody will notice. It does not work. The second attempt is even worse. By the third attempt, James finally realizes that the minions are not capable of solving this problem quietly. They need a proper plan. Fortunately, Gumi is calmer now that the controlling signal has disappeared. The creature no longer behaves like something being forced into action. Instead, it seems curious about its new surroundings. It watches people. It observes buildings. It follows the minions. And surprisingly, it appears fascinated by movies. That discovery brings James back to his original dream. For the first time since the disaster, he begins thinking about filmmaking again, not because he wants to forget what happened, but because he realizes that movies might actually be the best way to tell the story. He cannot reveal everything. He cannot show the creatures exactly as they are, but he can create a story inspired by what happened. A story about monsters, friendship, ambition, and a group of tiny creatures who accidentally turned Hollywood upside down. The idea starts growing in his mind, and before long, James is writing again. The minions immediately become interested. They assume they are going to be stars. James tries to explain that the movie is only inspired by what happened. The minions do not care. They want costumes. They want props. They want cameras. Most importantly, they want to be involved. James realizes that there is no point arguing. If the minions have learned anything from their adventure, it is that they belong around cameras. Unfortunately, their definition of filmmaking has not changed. They still believe that destroying a set counts as special effects. They still think costumes should be as ridiculous as possible. And they still have absolutely no respect for the concept of quiet on set. But James does not mind as much anymore. He has changed. Before the disaster, he believed filmmaking was about making everything perfect. Now he understands that perfection is impossible. Sometimes the unexpected moment becomes the best part. Sometimes an accident creates something better than the original plan. And sometimes the people who make the process difficult are the same people who make the final result special. That realization changes the way James works. Instead of trying to control every detail, he starts experimenting. He allows the minions to contribute. Some of their ideas are useless. Some are completely insane. But every once in a while, they create something surprisingly brilliant. The new production slowly takes shape. Meanwhile, Gumi becomes part of the creative process as well. James studies the creature's movements. He notices how expressive it is. He begins imagining how audiences might react to a monster that is not simply evil. That becomes the heart of his new story. The monster does not have to be the villain. It can be misunderstood. It can be frightened. It can be lonely. And it can become a friend. That idea gives James a completely different perspective on filmmaking. He realizes that audiences do not always need a simple hero and a simple villain. Sometimes the most interesting stories come from characters who are difficult to categorize. The minions obviously approve. They have never cared much about categories. They simply like whoever is fun to be around. As the production continues, James begins rebuilding his confidence. The disaster that nearly destroyed his dream has actually given him a new direction. He is no longer trying to imitate other filmmakers. He is telling a story that belongs to him, a story inspired by something nobody else experienced in quite the same way. But while James is focused on rebuilding, another problem begins developing. People are still searching for the creatures. Not everyone believes the threat is gone. Some want proof that the monsters were destroyed. Others believe there may be more hidden somewhere. And a few people see an opportunity to profit from the situation. Rumors about the creatures begin spreading through Hollywood. Stories become exaggerated. People claim they saw monsters in places they never visited. Photographs begin appearing. Some are fake, others are difficult to explain. James becomes increasingly concerned. If someone discovers Gumi, everything could start again. The minions do not seem worried. They are too busy preparing for the next scene, but James understands that the situation is fragile. He needs to protect Gumi while continuing the movie. That means keeping a secret. And secrets are difficult to maintain when the minions are involved. One afternoon, a group of people unexpectedly arrives near the production. They claim they are interested in James's movie. At first, James is excited. The attention could help his career, but something feels wrong. These people ask unusual questions. They are less interested in the movie itself and more interested in the creature. James becomes suspicious. He refuses to give them information. They leave, but not before one of them notices something unusual. Gumi. The secret may not be safe anymore. That night, James realizes someone has been watching the production. He tells the minions to stay together. For once, they understand that this is serious. The group begins preparing for another possible confrontation, but this time, the situation is different. They are not dealing with monsters. They are dealing with people who know what they are looking for, people who may have connections to the old research, people who may know more about the creatures than James does. The next morning, everything appears normal. The cameras are ready, the crew is working, the minions are causing their usual problems. Then Gumi disappears. James immediately knows something has gone wrong. He searches everywhere. Nothing. The minions spread out. They look behind buildings. Under equipment. Inside storage rooms. Everywhere. But Gumi is gone. James realizes that someone must have taken the creature, and whoever did it knew exactly how to avoid being noticed. The discovery changes everything. The peaceful ending James thought they had reached suddenly disappears. He cannot simply continue making his movie. He has to find Gumi. The minions are ready to help. James gathers everything they know. The people who were watching the production. The strange questions, the suspicious visitors, the rumors. It all leads in one direction. Someone wants the creature, and if they have Gumi, they may be planning to recreate the experiments. James knows he cannot allow that. The minions begin following clues around the city. Their investigation is chaotic, but surprisingly effective. They discover a vehicle connected to the suspicious visitors. They follow it. Then they lose it. They find another clue. Then one of the minions accidentally destroys it. James nearly loses his mind, but instead of giving up, they keep going. Eventually, they discover an old location connected to the original research. It has been abandoned for years. At least, that is what everyone believes. But when James and the minions arrive, they notice something immediately. There are fresh footprints. The place is being used. They enter carefully. Inside, they discover equipment that should not still be working. Machines begin powering up. Lights flicker. A strange sound fills the room. The minions look at each other. James knows that sound. It is the same type of signal they encountered before. Someone has restarted the system, and this time, they are doing it deliberately. James realizes what that means. The creature was not taken simply because someone wanted Gumi. They wanted to use Gumi as part of something much bigger. The minions move forward. They know they have to act quickly, but before they can reach the control room, the doors suddenly close behind them. They are trapped. A voice comes through the speakers. Someone has been waiting for them. James looks around the room. The minions are silent. For once, nobody has a joke. The voice explains that the first experiment failed because the creatures were too difficult to control. But Gumi is different. Gumi has formed a connection with the minions. That connection could make the creature easier to manipulate. The darkness lasts only a few seconds, but for James, it feels much longer. He can hear movement around him, machines humming in the walls, and the occasional confused sound from the minions. Somewhere in the darkness, something crashed to the floor. Then another crash. Then another. James whispers for everyone to stay still. Nobody listens. A tiny yellow shape suddenly runs past him. Then another. Then another. The minions have already started moving. James has no idea what they are doing, but he quickly realizes that they are not trying to escape through the main door. Instead, they are attacking the facility's power system. One of them finds a control panel. Another discovers a collection of cables. A third minion simply starts pulling things apart. It is not exactly a carefully designed plan, but it has one major advantage. Nobody controlling the facility expected it. The lights suddenly flash back on. For a moment, James can see the room clearly. The machinery is malfunctioning. Warning signals are appearing across the screens, and the locked doors have opened. The minions cheer. James does not waste the opportunity. He tells everyone to move. They rush through the corridor while alarms echo behind them, but they quickly discover that escaping the room is only the beginning. The facility is much larger than James expected. There are multiple levels, locked sections, storage rooms, laboratories, and enormous chambers hidden beneath the main building. The deeper they go, the stranger the place becomes. Some rooms contain old equipment, others contain documents and photographs. And then they find something that makes James stop completely. There are records of the minions. Not just recent observations, older records. Much older. The people behind the experiments had been studying them for longer than James ever imagined. The minions are not simply accidental visitors to this world of monsters. Someone has been interested in them for years. James begins connecting the pieces. The minions have always been attracted to powerful figures. They have always followed villains. They have always found themselves near major events. But perhaps there was another reason. Perhaps someone understood their unusual nature long before anyone else did. The thought is unsettling. James looks at the minions. They are completely unaware of the significance of what they have discovered. One of them is trying to use an old machine as a chair. James almost laughs. Even now, they have no idea how important they may be. Then they hear a sound. Footsteps. Someone is coming. The group quickly hides. A door opens. Several people enter the room. James recognizes some of them from the earlier incident. They are not ordinary employees. They are part of the organization responsible for the experiments. James listens carefully. They are discussing Gumi. The creature is being prepared for another test. James realizes they have found the place where Gumi is being held. But there is a problem. The room is heavily protected. Getting inside will not be easy. The minions are ready to act immediately. James stops them. This time, they need to be careful. If they rush in without a plan, Gumi could be hurt. So James decides they need information first. They quietly follow the researchers. The group moves through another corridor and enters a large chamber. Through a window, James sees Gumi. The creature is trapped inside a transparent enclosure. It looks frightened. The minions become visibly upset. They want to rescue their friend immediately. James understands. But he also sees something else. The machine surrounding Gumi is connected to a larger system. If they simply break the enclosure, the machine could react. They need to shut it down first. That means reaching the control room. The minions nod. This time, they actually listen. They move quietly through the facility. For several minutes, everything goes perfectly. Then one minion sneezes. Everyone freezes. A researcher turns around. The minion tries to hide. There is nowhere to hide. James closes his eyes. The researcher walks closer. The minion suddenly smiles and waves. The researcher looks confused. Before he can react, another minion jumps out, then another. The corridor explodes into chaos. James realizes the stealth mission is officially over. The minions run in every direction. Researchers chase them. Doors open. Alarms activate. And somehow, in the middle of all this chaos, James reaches the control room. He locks the door. For the first time, he has a few seconds to think. The system has multiple controls. He needs to find the one connected to Gumi. The screens are filled with information. James searches through them. He finds the creature's identification. He finds the power level. He finds the control sequence. Then he notices something else. There is a secondary system. A much larger one. The machine controlling Gumi is only part of it. The real purpose of the facility is much bigger. They are not trying to control one creature. They are trying to control all of them. James realizes the scale of the plan. If the system is activated completely, every creature connected to it could be manipulated. That could mean hundreds of monsters. Maybe more. The consequences would be impossible to predict. James knows he cannot simply shut down one machine. He has to destroy the entire system. But doing that could trigger a massive reaction. The facility could collapse. The creatures could become uncontrollable. And Gumi could be caught in the middle. James hesitates. Then he hears a familiar sound outside the door. The minions. They are trying to get inside. James smiles. He knows what he has to do. He opens the door. The minions rush in. James explains the situation as quickly as possible. They do not understand all of it, but they understand the important part. Gumi is in danger. The entire system has to be stopped. They agree. The plan is divided into several parts. One group will reach Gumi. Another will disable the power system. James will shut down the central controls. The minions immediately volunteer for all three jobs. James refuses. They cannot all do everything. But after a brief argument, he realizes there is actually no point trying to separate them. They work better together. So the group moves. The first minions reach Gumi's chamber. They distract the guards. Another group starts working on the power connections. James returns to the control room. The system is already activating. Warning messages appear across the screens. The creatures are responding. Outside the facility, strange noises begin echoing through the city. James knows they are running out of time. He enters the shutdown sequence. The system rejects it. He tries again. Nothing. Then he realizes there is a manual override. It requires someone to physically enter the main chamber. James looks at the screen. He understands what that means. Someone has to go inside. He leaves the control room. The main chamber is enormous. At its center is the machine controlling the creatures. It is far more powerful than anything James has seen before. He approaches it carefully. The machine reacts. The lights become brighter. The sound becomes louder. Gumi begins struggling inside its enclosure. James reaches the manual controls. He starts shutting the system down, but the machine fights back. The floor begins shaking. The walls crack. The entire facility begins losing stability. The minions see what is happening. They run toward James. He tells them to get Gumi out. They refuse to leave him. James shouts that they need to go. The minions ignore him. Instead, they begin helping. One climbs onto the machine. Another reaches the cables. Another tries to pull a lever. Their combined effort begins slowing the system. For a few seconds, it works. Then the machine overloads. A massive burst of energy fills the room. Everyone is thrown backward. James falls to the floor. The minions are scattered. Gumi's enclosure breaks open. The creature falls free. For a moment, nobody moves. Then Gumi slowly stands. The creature looks toward James. Then toward the minions. And something unexpected happens. Instead of running away, Gumi moves toward them. The creature protects them. The remaining energy from the machine begins gathering around Gumi. James realizes what is happening. Gumi is absorbing the signal. The creature is taking the energy away from the system. That gives James one final chance. He reaches the central control. He pulls the shutdown lever. Everything goes silent. The machine stops. The lights disappear. And the creatures across the city become still. The system is finally dead. But the facility is collapsing. James looks around. They have only seconds to escape. The minions grab Gumi. Everyone runs. They race through the corridors as walls collapse behind them. Doors slam shut. Dust fills the air. The floor shakes. James sees the exit ahead. They sprint. A massive section of the ceiling falls behind them. The group barely makes it outside. The entire facility collapses. For several moments, nobody speaks. James looks at the ruins. Then he looks at Gumi. The creature is safe. The minions are safe. But the discovery has changed everything. The organization behind the experiments is gone. But James now knows something he never knew before. There are forces in this world that people have been trying to control for years. And the minions may somehow be connected to that history. The question is no longer whether monsters exist. That has already been proven. The real question is why the minions were being studied. What makes them so special? And who was interested in them before James ever met them? James looks toward the horizon. He knows he cannot ignore those questions anymore. The adventure that started with a movie has become something much bigger. And the minions, completely unaware of the mystery surrounding them, are already celebrating. One of them finds an old camera lying in the dirt. He picks it up. The others gather around. James looks at them. Then he smiles. Maybe the next chapter of their story is not about monsters at all. For the first time, James begins to understand that the mystery surrounding the minions may be more important than the monster crisis itself. The machines are destroyed, the people behind the experiments have been stopped, and Gumi is finally free. Yet the questions left behind are harder to ignore than ever. Why were the minions being studied? How long had someone known about them? And what exactly made them so interesting to people who were already experimenting with creatures far more powerful than themselves? James keeps thinking about the records they found inside the facility. The documents were old, but some of them contained details that seemed impossible. There were references to the minions appearing in different places long before modern technology could have tracked them. That discovery leaves James wondering whether the minions have been moving through human history for much longer than anyone realizes. The minions themselves are completely unconcerned. They are more interested in the old camera they found. One of them points it toward another and starts making strange poses. Another tries to operate the controls. The camera suddenly turns on. Everyone freezes. Then the minions become fascinated. James takes the camera from them and examines it carefully. It is an old film camera, but there is something unusual about it. There is film already inside. James wonders who used it. The camera may have been abandoned in the facility for years, possibly decades. If there is footage inside, it could reveal something about the experiments. James decides they need to develop it. The minions immediately want to watch it. James explains that film does not work like that. They have to wait. The minions do not like waiting. They follow James everywhere, constantly asking about the camera. Eventually, they return to a safer location and begin working with the equipment. The film is damaged. Some sections are difficult to recover, but after careful work, images begin appearing. At first, the footage looks ordinary. Researchers walking through the facility. Machines being tested. Scientists examining strange objects. Then something appears in the background. A group of minions. James stops the footage. He watches again. The minions are there. But the footage appears to be much older than the time James thought they had first become involved with the research. He rewinds it. There they are again, walking through the same facility. This means the minions were not brought there recently. They had been there before, much earlier. James keeps watching. The footage shows the minions interacting with researchers. They do not appear frightened. In fact, they seem completely comfortable. One researcher gives them something. The minions react excitedly. Another scene shows them exploring the laboratory. Then the footage suddenly changes. The researchers begin testing a device. The minions are moved away from the equipment. Something goes wrong. The machine activates. The recording becomes distorted. Then the film ends. James sits silently. The evidence changes his understanding of everything. The minions were not simply subjects of the experiments. At some point, they may have been helping the researchers. That raises another possibility. Maybe the minions knew more about the creatures than anyone realized. James looks at them. They are laughing and playing with the camera. He asks if they remember the facility. The minions stare at him. For a moment, their expressions change. One of them looks confused. Another points toward the old camera. Then they begin making sounds that James cannot understand. He realizes they may actually remember something. The minions have memories connected to the place, but those memories are incomplete. They cannot explain them in words. James decides not to force the issue. Instead, he begins studying the recovered footage. He notices a symbol appearing several times. The same symbol is present on the equipment, on documents, and near the creature containment areas. It appears to represent an organization, but there is no name, only the symbol. James searches through the remaining records. Eventually, he finds a reference to an old project. The project was designed to study unusual life forms and determine whether they could coexist with humans. That sounds harmless at first. But later notes reveal that the researchers became interested in controlling these creatures. The project changed. It stopped being about understanding. It became about power. And that is when everything started going wrong. James realizes that the original researchers may not have been evil. They may have genuinely wanted to learn. But somewhere along the way, ambition took over. The same thing happened to the people James met later. They saw the potential of the creatures and wanted to exploit it. The history of the project becomes a warning. Curiosity can lead to discovery. But when curiosity becomes obsession, the consequences can become dangerous. Gumi seems to understand that something is wrong. The creature watches the footage from a distance. When a particular scene appears, Gumi reacts. James notices immediately. He pauses the recording. Gumi moves closer. James plays the scene again. The creature reacts even more strongly. There is something familiar about the footage. James realizes Gumi may have memories too. Perhaps the creatures were connected to the project before the experiments began. Maybe they were not discovered. Maybe they were invited. That possibility changes the entire mystery. James starts asking a different question. What if the creatures were never meant to be controlled? What if they came to humans willingly? And what if the original relationship between them was completely different from what the later researchers believed? The answers are still unclear. But James now has a reason to continue searching. He returns to the old facility with the Minions and Gumi. The place is dangerous, but some sections survive the collapse. They search through the remaining rooms. Eventually, they find an underground archive. The door is almost impossible to open. The Minions try several methods. None work. Then one Minion notices a small opening. He reaches inside. The door opens immediately. James stares at him. The Minion smiles proudly. They enter. Inside are hundreds of old records. Some are written documents. Others are photographs. There are even recordings. James begins sorting through them. One file immediately catches his attention. It contains information about an event that happened many years earlier. The report describes the first confirmed encounter between humans and the creatures. But there is something strange about the date. It is much older than expected. The creatures had been known for generations. They were not a new discovery. They had simply remained hidden. James continues reading. The original researchers believed that the creatures were capable of understanding human emotions. Some even believed they could communicate through behavior rather than language. That explains Gumi's relationship with the Minions. The connection may not be accidental. The creatures may naturally respond to emotional bonds. The Minions, with their unusual personalities, may have been able to connect with them more easily than humans could. That would explain why Gumi trusted them. It would also explain why the organization wanted to study the Minions. They were looking for a way to control the creatures. And the Minions may have been the key. James suddenly realizes how dangerous that knowledge could be. If someone else discovers the same information, they could try to recreate the experiment. The danger is not gone. It has simply changed form. James decides that the remaining records cannot fall into the wrong hands. He gathers everything important. The Minions help him carry the equipment. Gumi stays close, but before they can leave, they hear something, a distant sound. Someone else is inside the archive. James turns off the lights. Everyone becomes silent. Footsteps approach. Slowly. Carefully. Someone enters the room. James recognizes the voice. It belongs to one of the people connected to the old organization. But that should be impossible. The organization was supposed to be finished. James listens. The person is speaking to someone through a communication device. They are discussing the archive. They know James is there. They know about Gumi. And they know that the Minions have discovered the old records. James realizes that the organization may be much larger than he originally believed. The people they stalked were only one part of it. There are others. Maybe they are spread across different locations. Maybe they have been watching the entire situation. And now they know that James has discovered the truth. The Minions look at James. He puts a finger to his lips. They quietly move toward another exit. But one Minion accidentally bumps into a metal object. It falls. The sound echoes through the archive. The footsteps stop. Then the person outside starts moving faster. James knows they have been discovered. The group runs. They race through the archive while the stranger follows behind them. James grabs the most important records. The Minions carry whatever they can. Gumi pushes through a blocked doorway. They reach another corridor. But the exit is locked. James searches for a way out. The stranger is getting closer. The Minions panic. Then one of them notices a small ventilation opening. It is far too small for James. But the Minions can fit. They crawl inside. James follows as best he can. Gumi cannot fit. The creature remains outside. James refuses to leave Gumi behind. He turns back. The stranger appears at the end of the corridor. For a moment, nobody moves. Then Gumi steps forward. The creature stands between James and the stranger. The stranger raises a device. Gumi reacts immediately. The same type of signal used in the earlier experiments begins filling the room. The device James took from the facility becomes the first real piece of evidence they have that the people behind the experiments are still active. But there is a problem. Nobody knows how the device works, and turning it on without understanding it could be extremely dangerous. James keeps it locked away while he studies everything they recovered. The old camera, the damaged recordings, the documents. And now this strange piece of technology. Each item tells a different part of the story, but none of them provides the complete answer. The Minions are not particularly interested in the investigation. They have returned to their usual routine. One is trying to repair the camera. Another is attempting to make a tiny movie set. A third has discovered that the device James is protecting makes an interesting noise when touched. James catches him just before he presses a button. He takes the device away. The minion looks disappointed. James reminds him that the last time they touched unknown technology, an entire building almost collapsed. The minion nods. Then immediately reaches for it again. James sighs. Some things never change. Still, the minion's curiosity eventually becomes useful. While examining the old camera, one of them discovers a hidden compartment. Inside is a tiny piece of film. James carefully removes it. This piece of film looks different from the others. It has been protected from damage. That means someone intentionally stored it. James develops it. The footage is short, only a few seconds, but those seconds change everything. The recording shows a group of people standing inside a large chamber. Behind them is a massive circular structure. James recognizes it immediately. It looks almost identical to the system they destroyed. But there is something else in the room. A group of minions. They are standing beside the researchers. And this time, they are not confused. They seem to know exactly what is happening. One of the researchers approaches them. He places a small object in front of the minions. The minions react. Then the recording ends. James watches it again. Something about the scene feels familiar. He looks at the old device they recovered. The shape is almost identical to the object shown in the footage. That cannot be a coincidence. James starts comparing the two. The device appears to have been part of the original experiment, but why would the minions have been involved? He begins searching the documents again. Eventually, he finds a reference to something called a resonance response. The researchers believed that certain living creatures could influence the behavior of the monsters through emotional or neurological signals. The minions appeared to have an unusually strong effect. The theory was never fully proven, but the researchers continued testing it. James realizes that the minions may have been used as a bridge between humans and monsters. That explains why Gumi responds to them. But it also raises a much bigger question. What happened during the original experiment? Why did the minions disappear from the research, and why did the creatures remain hidden? James decides that the only way to answer those questions is to find the original location where the first experiment took place. The documents provide a clue. A location. An old theater. That surprises James. He expected a laboratory, not a theater, but the more he reads, the stranger the connection becomes. The theater was apparently used for early film experiments. Researchers believed that moving images, sound, and certain frequencies could influence the creatures. It sounds impossible, but after everything James has seen, he is no longer willing to dismiss anything. The theater has been abandoned for decades. It is located far from the main Hollywood district. James decides they have to go there. The minions are excited. They assume they are going to see a movie. James tells them that they are going to investigate a mystery. The minions immediately become even more excited. Gumi stays close. The journey takes them away from the city. The environment changes. The streets become quieter. The buildings become older. Eventually, they arrive at the theater. From the outside, it looks forgotten. The sign is broken. The windows are covered in dust. The doors are locked. The minions stare at the building. Then one of them pushes the door. It opens. James looks at him. The minion smiles. They enter. Inside, the theater is enormous. Old seats fill the main hall. A giant screen covers the front. The stage is covered with equipment. Some of it appears to be decades old. James walks toward the projection room. He finds an old film projector. It is connected to a strange machine. The same symbol from the research facility is engraved into the side. James realizes they have found another piece of the puzzle. He searches the room. Eventually, he discovers several film reels. Most are destroyed, but one is still intact. He places it into the projector. The machine begins turning. The screen lights up. The footage shows the theater as it looked many years ago. A group of researchers stands on the stage. Several minions are there too. James watches carefully. The researchers begin projecting images onto the screen. At first, nothing happens. Then the creatures appear. Not physically, they appear as shadows. The researchers are studying their reactions. The minions watch the screen. Their expressions change. They seem fascinated. Then something unexpected happens. One of the minions begins singing. The others join. The creature's shadows move. The researchers become excited. They have discovered something. The sound of the minions is affecting the creatures. James realizes that the minions' voices may have a unique resonance. The researchers continue experimenting. The more the minions sing, the stronger the response becomes. But then the experiment goes wrong. The shadows become larger. The machine begins overheating. The researchers panic. They try to shut everything down. The minions continue singing because they do not understand what is happening. The screen becomes filled with strange images. Then the film cuts out. James stops the projector. He is stunned. The minions may have accidentally caused the original incident. Their voices may have opened a connection between their world and the creatures. That could explain why the monsters appeared. It could also explain why the later organization wanted to control them. James looks at the minions. They are completely silent. For once, they understand that they may have been connected to something much bigger than themselves. But there is still one missing piece. Where did the creatures come from? The film suggests that the minions did not create them. They simply opened a connection. That means the monsters existed somewhere else, somewhere beyond what humans understood. The theater may have been the first doorway. James searches the building for more evidence. Behind the stage, he discovers a hidden room. Inside are old notes. The researchers describe a place they call the other side. They believe the creatures come from another dimension. The theory is difficult to accept, but the evidence is everywhere. The creatures are not simply hidden animals. They may come from a completely different environment. The original researchers wanted to communicate with them. The later organization wanted to control them. That difference explains why everything became so dangerous. James finds one final document. It describes a second experiment. The first experiment opened a connection. The second experiment was supposed to create a permanent gateway. The project was abandoned. Or at least, that is what the document claims. James realizes that if someone has restarted the technology, they may be trying to reopen that gateway. And if they succeed, the creatures could begin crossing over again. This time, there may be no way to stop them. The minions look at James. They know something important is happening. Gumi suddenly becomes restless. The creature moves toward the stage. James follows. Gumi looks at the old projector. Then at the screen. Something is triggering a memory. James turns on the machine again. The screen lights up. Gumi reacts immediately. The creature touches the projector. The screen changes. Instead of showing old footage, it displays something new. A location. A strange landscape. Massive structures. Dark skies. And hundreds of creatures moving in the distance. James stares at the image. He understands. The projector is no longer simply showing recordings. It is acting like a window. The old researchers were right. There is another place, and the connection is still active. The image becomes clearer. James sees something in the distance. A huge structure. It looks like the center of the creature world. Gumi reaches toward the screen. The machine reacts. The entire theater begins shaking. The minions panic. James tries to shut everything down, but this time, the machine does not respond. The gateway is opening, and something on the other side has noticed them. A massive shadow appears. It moves closer. James steps backward. The minions gather around Gumi. The shadow continues approaching. Then the screen suddenly goes black. Everything stops. Silence fills the theater. James looks at the projector. The machine is smoking. The gateway has closed, but the image they saw cannot be forgotten. There is another world. There are more creatures, and someone may already be trying to reach them. James realizes that the monster problem they thought they had solved was only the beginning. The first outbreak was not the end of the story. It was the first warning. Now they know where the creatures came from. But knowing where they came from creates a new problem. If there is another world filled with monsters, what happens if the gateway opens again? And what happens if the creatures come through without Gumi to guide them? The minions look toward James. One of them points at the broken projector. Then points toward the exit. James nods. They need to leave. They need to leave. The sound outside the theater becomes louder. At first, James cannot tell what he is hearing. It is not the same sound the creatures made during the earlier attacks. This is deeper, slower, almost like something enormous is moving through the ground beneath them. The minions stop joking. That alone tells James how serious the situation has become. Gumi moves toward the theater doors and listens. Its body becomes tense. James quietly asks what is wrong, even though he knows Gumi cannot answer him in words. The creature looks back. Then the doors shake again. This time, dust falls from the ceiling. Something is definitely outside. James tells everyone to move away from the entrance. The minions gather behind him. One of them grabs an old prop from the stage. It is supposed to look like a sword. The minion holds it proudly. James looks at the wooden weapon. Then he looks at the enormous doors. He decides not to explain how useless the sword would be. The doors suddenly burst open. A huge shadow appears in the entrance. Everyone freezes. The creature steps inside. It is unlike anything they have seen before. It is larger than Gumi. Its body is covered with strange armor-like structures, and its eyes glow faintly in the darkness. But what surprises James most is the creature's behavior. It does not attack. It simply looks around. Then it looks directly at Gumi. Gumi takes a step forward. The two creatures stare at each other. The minions slowly move behind James. James expects an attack. Instead, the larger creature makes a low sound. Gumi responds. The exchange continues for several seconds. James cannot understand what they are saying, but it is obvious that the two creatures recognize each other. This changes everything. The creature did not come through the gateway by accident. It came looking for Gumi. James watches carefully. Gumi approaches. The larger creature lowers its head. There is no aggression, only recognition. The minions slowly come closer. One of them reaches out. The creature sniffs him. The minion smiles. James immediately tells him not to do anything stupid. The minion touches the creature anyway. Nothing happens. Instead, the creature allows it. James realizes that the monsters may have a social structure. They may communicate with each other in ways humans cannot understand. Gumi was not alone on the other side. There are others, and they may have been searching for Gumi ever since the gateway closed. But why? That question remains unanswered. The larger creature suddenly turns toward the broken projector. It approaches the machine. Then it looks at the screen. The screen remains dark. The creature makes another sound. Gumi responds. James watches the interaction. Something is being communicated. Then the large creature turns toward the exit. It begins walking away. Gumi follows. The minions follow Gumi. James has no choice but to follow them too. Outside, the night is unusually quiet. The creature moves toward a nearby open area. James notices something strange. It is not trying to escape. It is looking for something. Gumi stops near an old structure. The larger creature touches the ground. James walks closer. There is a faint glow beneath the surface. He realizes the creature is sensing the same energy that powered the gateway. The connection is still there. Even though the machine was destroyed, the doorway has left something behind. That means the gateway could potentially be reopened. And the creatures know it. The larger creature looks toward James. For a moment, James feels as though it is asking him for help. He has no idea how to respond. Then the minions begin making sounds. The creature looks toward them. Something changes. The energy beneath the ground becomes stronger. James steps backward. The minions continue. Gumi joins them. The larger creature responds. It sounds almost like a song. James suddenly remembers the old footage from the theater. The minions' voices had affected the creatures. Maybe their voices are not just a way of communicating. Maybe they are a form of resonance. The creatures may be able to use that resonance to locate the gateway. If that is true, then the minions could potentially reopen it. James immediately tells them to stop. The minions stop. The glow fades. The larger creature looks disappointed. James understands the danger. If the minions accidentally reopened the connection, they could bring an entire population of creatures into the human world. They cannot risk that, but the creature seems desperate. It wants to return home. And Gumi wants to go with it. James realizes that he has another difficult choice to make. Keeping Gumi in the human world may be safer for everyone, but Gumi may never truly belong here. The creature has a home, a family, perhaps an entire community waiting for it. James looks at Gumi. For the first time, he understands that protecting someone does not always mean keeping them close. Sometimes it means helping them return to where they belong. But opening the gateway is too dangerous. There must be another way. James returns to the theater. He searches the remaining equipment. The old researchers must have had a controlled method for opening the connection. If they managed to communicate with the creatures without unleashing them, there must be a way to repeat the process safely. The minions help him search. They find several old notebooks. Most are useless. Then one contains a diagram. It shows the gateway. There are several stages: a controlled opening, a temporary connection, and a closing sequence. James realizes the original researchers understood the danger. They never intended to keep the gateway open permanently. Their goal was communication. The later organization changed the system. They wanted permanent access. That was the mistake. James now has an idea. If they can rebuild only the communication system, they may be able to help Gumi return without opening a permanent gateway. But they need one more component, a power source. The device they recovered from the previous facility might provide exactly what they need. James retrieves it. The minions watch nervously. He connects it to the old equipment. Nothing happens. He checks the connections. Still nothing. Then one of the minions notices something. There is a small symbol on the device. The same symbol appears on the projector. James connects the two. The machine activates. The theater fills with light. The screen becomes visible again. But this time, James does not see the strange landscape. He sees the larger creature. It is standing on the other side. Gumi approaches the screen. The creature responds. For the first time, James realizes that the screen is not simply showing another world. It is functioning like a communication window. They can see each other. They can interact. The larger creature moves closer. Gumi touches the screen. The creature touches the other side. For a brief moment, there is a connection. The minions become emotional. Even James feels the significance of the moment. Gumi finally has a way home. But then the machine begins overheating. James sees the warning signs. The system cannot remain active for long. They have only minutes. He needs to find a way to transfer Gumi through without opening the entire gateway. The old notes provide one possibility. The connection can be narrowed. Instead of creating a doorway large enough for multiple creatures, the machine can create a small passage, only one creature at a time. James believes it could work, but the process is risky. If the power fails at the wrong moment, Gumi could become trapped between the two sides. The minions do not care. They want Gumi to go home. James begins preparing the system. The larger creature waits. The minions gather around Gumi. For the first time, they understand that they may have to say goodbye. One minion hugs Gumi, then another. Soon all of them are surrounding the creature. Gumi responds affectionately. James watches quietly. The friendship between them has grown far beyond what anyone expected. Gumi was once just a strange creature caught in a dangerous experiment. Now it is family. The machine begins powering up. The connection becomes stronger. A narrow opening appears. James tells Gumi to move. The creature hesitates. It looks back at the minions. Then at James. James nods. Gumi steps forward. For a second, nothing happens. Then the creature disappears through the opening. The minions stare at the screen. Gumi appears on the other side. The larger creature approaches. They touch. The minions cheer. James smiles. It worked. But the machine is still running. He quickly begins shutting it down. The opening starts shrinking. The creatures on the other side move away. Gumi looks back one last time. The minions wave. James waves too. Then the connection closes. The theater becomes silent. The projector stops. The screen goes dark. Gumi is gone. The minions stand there quietly. For a few moments, nobody moves. Then one minion begins crying. Another hugs him. James kneels beside them. He tells them that Gumi is safe. That should be enough. But saying goodbye is never easy, especially when you know you may never see someone again. The group leaves the theater. Outside, the night feels different. The threat is gone. The gateway is closed. Gumi is home. James believes the story has finally reached its ending. But as they walk away, he notices something. The old camera is still recording. He picks it up. The screen shows the theater. But there is something in the background. A small figure. Another creature. It appears for only a second. Then disappears. James stops walking. He rewinds the footage. The figure appears again. It was not Gumi. It was not the large creature. It was something else. Something that may have crossed over before the gateway closed. James looks at the minions. They look back at him. Nobody says anything. They already know. Their adventure may not be finished. Because, if even one creature remained behind, then the connection between the two worlds may still exist. And somewhere in the darkness, something is watching them. Something they have never seen before. James keeps staring at the camera, trying to convince himself that what he just saw was some kind of mistake. The image was brief, distorted, and surrounded by darkness. Maybe it was nothing more than a reflection. Maybe the damaged film had created an illusion. But deep down, James knows that is not true. He rewinds the footage again. The figure appears. A small movement near the edge of the frame. Then it disappears behind the theater wall. James freezes the image. The minions gather around him. They stare at the screen. Nobody laughs. Nobody makes a joke. For once, the minions understand that they are looking at something they do not understand. James zooms in as much as the old equipment allows. The image becomes blurry, but the shape is still visible. It has a different appearance from Gumi. It is smaller, thinner, and it seems to be watching the camera. James wonders how long it had been there. Had it crossed over before the gateway closed? Had it been hiding inside the theater? Or was it something completely different? The questions keep coming. James knows he cannot simply ignore it. If another creature is hiding somewhere in the human world, the consequences could be serious. The minions immediately want to search the theater. James tells them it is too dangerous. They ignore him. Within seconds, they disappear into the building. James follows, already knowing this is going to become another disaster. They search backstage areas, storage rooms, corridors, and even the old projection room. Nothing. No footprints. No sounds. No sign of the creature. For a moment, James begins thinking that maybe the recording really was misleading. Then one of the minions finds something, a strange mark on the wall. It is small, almost impossible to notice. James walks closer. The symbol looks familiar. It is similar to the markings they saw on the old equipment, but not exactly the same. This version appears to have been scratched into the wall from the inside. James touches it. The surface is cold. The minions look at him. He tells them not to touch anything. Naturally, one of them touches it. Nothing happens. Then another minion touches it. Still nothing. James sighs. He starts examining the symbol more carefully. It appears to be a form of communication. At least, that is what he believes. The old researchers may have used symbols to identify different types of creatures. If that is true, this mark could tell them what they are dealing with. James photographs it. He also records the location. Then he notices another mark. And another. They form a trail. The marks continue through the hallway. James follows them. The minions follow James. The trail eventually leads to a locked room. James tries the handle. It does not move. One of the minions immediately pulls out a tool. James stops him. There is something about this room that makes him uncomfortable. He checks the old records. The room appears on one of the original blueprints, but there is no information about what it was used for. That makes it even more suspicious. James searches for another entrance. Eventually, he finds a small door hidden behind a curtain. It leads inside. The room is almost completely empty. There is an old table, a broken chair, and a small box. James opens it. Inside is a collection of photographs. The photographs show the theater many years earlier. Researchers. Machines. The minions. And the creatures. But one photograph stands out. It shows a much larger group of creatures standing behind the researchers. James stares at it. There are dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. The photograph appears to have been taken before the first gateway experiment. That means the researchers had already communicated with an entire group. James studies the people in the photograph. One person is standing apart from the others. He appears to be holding the same device James recovered. James recognizes the face. It is the same person whose voice they heard in the facility. But that should be impossible. The photograph is decades old. James turns it over. There is a date written on the back. The date confirms his fear. The person has been involved in the project for a very long time. Maybe he is not simply working for the organization. Maybe he is one of its founders. And if he is still alive, he may know the complete history of the creatures. James realizes they have been looking in the wrong direction. They have been trying to understand the monsters. They should have been trying to understand the people who discovered them. The minions suddenly hear something outside, a noise. They move toward the door. James follows. The sound is coming from the street. At first, everything looks normal. Then a streetlight flickers. Another goes dark. The minions look around. James feels a strange pressure in the air. Something is nearby. He tells everyone to stay together. They move carefully through the street. Nothing. Then they hear a soft sound behind them. They turn. A small creature stands at the end of the road. James immediately recognizes the shape from the camera. It is the creature they saw. The minions stare. The creature does not run. It watches them. James slowly moves forward. The creature steps backward. He stops. He does not want to frighten it. The minions begin making soft sounds. The creature looks at them. It responds. James realizes something. The creature may understand the minions. But unlike Gumi, it does not seem comfortable around humans. It keeps its distance. James kneels down. He holds out his hand. The creature watches, then slowly approaches. For a brief moment, it comes close enough to touch him. James smiles. Then the creature suddenly looks behind him. Its expression changes. It becomes frightened. James turns. Nothing is there. When he looks back, the creature has disappeared. The minions begin searching. James stops them. Something scared the creature. Whatever it was may still be nearby. They return to the theater. James studies the photographs again. He notices something he missed earlier. The small creature appears in one of the photographs. It is standing beside the same person from the old image. James understands. The creature may have been connected to the organization long before the recent events. Maybe it was never wild. Maybe it escaped. Or perhaps it was deliberately sent into the human world. That possibility changes everything. If someone sent it, then the creature may have been looking for something, or someone. James starts wondering whether Gumi's arrival was also part of a larger plan. Maybe the creatures are not simply crossing into the human world randomly. Maybe someone is guiding them. The minions become restless. They want answers. James agrees. They need to find the person in the photograph. But how do they find someone who has been hiding for decades? The answer comes from the old documents. A name appears repeatedly. James recognizes it from the files. He searches through the papers until he finds an address. It leads to a private estate outside the city. The place belongs to the same family connected to the original research. James realizes that the organization may have continued through generations. The experiments changed. The technology improved. But the goal remained the same. Understand the creatures. Control them. Use them. James packs the equipment. The minions prepare themselves. They are clearly excited about another adventure. James warns them that this time they need to be careful. They nod. He looks at them suspiciously. He knows that promise will probably last about 30 seconds. They leave the theater. The journey takes them into a quieter part of the countryside. Eventually, they reach the estate. From outside, it looks abandoned. The gates are rusty. The garden is overgrown. There are no lights in the windows. James checks the address again. This is the place. They enter. The minions spread out. James tells them to stay close. They ignore him. He finds them a few minutes later standing in front of a giant painting. The painting shows the family that once owned the estate. James looks carefully. There is a familiar face, the same person from the old photographs. He looks almost exactly the same. James feels a chill. How could someone in a decades-old photograph look nearly unchanged? The answer may explain everything. Before James can investigate further, the lights turn on. A voice comes from the upper floor. You finally found me. James looks up. A man is standing at the top of the staircase. Older than the person in the photograph, but unmistakably the same individual. The minions move closer to James. The man smiles. He tells James that he has been waiting for him. James asks how he could possibly know they were coming. The man simply says that the minions always lead people back to the truth. James does not understand. The man begins explaining. The experiments were never designed to destroy the creatures. They were designed to establish communication. The first researchers believed humans and the creatures could coexist, but other people became obsessed with controlling them. The project split into two groups. One wanted understanding. The other wanted power. The conflict destroyed the original program. The man says he spent years trying to repair what had been broken. James asks why Gumi was captured. The man says Gumi was not captured because of its strength. Gumi was captured because it was a messenger. James freezes. A messenger. The man explains that Gumi was not simply trying to return home. It was trying to warn the humans. Something is coming. Something much larger than the creatures they have already encountered. James asks what? The man looks toward the window. He says the gateway was never meant to stay closed forever. The creatures are preparing to cross, not because they want to invade, because something else is forcing them out. James feels a growing sense of fear. If the creatures are running from something, then the real threat may be waiting on the other side. The minions listen silently. The man continues. He says the old researchers discovered another presence beyond the creature world. The decision to cross into the creature world changes everything. Until now, James has always been trying to keep the monsters away from the human world. Now he is preparing to do the exact opposite. He is going to enter their world voluntarily, knowing almost nothing about what is waiting on the other side. The old researcher explains that the gateway cannot simply be opened whenever they want. It requires a specific frequency, and that frequency is connected to the minions. James immediately understands why the organization spent so much time studying them. The minions were never just random assistants in the experiments. They were the key. Their voices, their movements, even their emotional reactions could influence the gateway. The researcher tells James that the minions were involved in the earliest successful communication experiments. They were able to establish a connection without destroying the equipment. But there was one problem. The minions never fully understood what they were doing. They simply reacted naturally. That was what made them so effective. James looks at the minions. They are standing together, listening carefully. One of them raises his hand. James asks what he wants. The minion points toward himself, then toward the gateway. He is volunteering. The others do the same. James smiles. He already knew they would. The researcher begins preparing the equipment. The process is different from the earlier gateway experiment. This time, they are not trying to create a massive opening. They want something controlled, something temporary, but there is no guarantee it will work. The gateway could collapse. It could open somewhere unexpected, or it could attract the force the researcher warned them about. James asks what exactly they will find on the other side. The researcher says that no one knows. The original explorers never went far enough. They saw the creature world, but they never understood its entire structure. The creatures live in different regions. Some are peaceful, some are dangerous, and some are terrified of something that exists deeper within their world. That unknown presence is the reason so many creatures tried crossing into the human world. They were escaping. James thinks about Gumi. Suddenly, Gumi's actions make much more sense. It was not trying to attack anyone. It was trying to survive. The researcher tells James that if they enter the creature world, they should find Gumi first. Gumi may know how to reach the central region. That is where the real problem begins. James gathers the equipment. The minions are excited, nervous, and completely incapable of standing still. One minion tries to wear a helmet that is far too large. Another carries a bag filled with objects James has never seen before. A third brings snacks. James asks why. The minion shrugs. James decides not to argue. The equipment is activated. The room begins vibrating. A familiar glow appears. The gateway starts forming. James looks through it. On the other side is a landscape unlike anything he has ever seen. The sky is darker. The ground has strange colors. Massive structures rise in the distance. There are creatures everywhere. Some are walking. Others are flying. Some are enormous. Others are small. James realizes that the world is far more populated than he imagined. The minions stare in amazement. For a moment, nobody moves. Then one minion steps forward. James grabs him. They have to go together. He reminds them that this is not a vacation. They finally step through. The sensation is strange. James feels as though he is falling and standing at the same time. Then suddenly, everything becomes still. They are on the other side. The gateway remains open behind them. James turns around. The opening looks smaller from this side. He realizes they may not have much time. The minions spread out. James immediately calls them back. The creature world is beautiful in some places, but it is also unpredictable. The group begins walking. At first, most creatures simply watch them. Some seem curious. Others keep their distance. The minions try to greet everyone. James tells them not to approach strangers. They continue approaching strangers. Eventually, they meet a small group of creatures that recognize Gumi's description. James asks where Gumi is. The creatures respond with gestures. They point toward the mountains. James understands. Gumi is there. The journey begins. The landscape becomes more difficult as they move. The ground rises. Strange plants grow everywhere. Some appear harmless. Others move when the group passes. The minions are fascinated. James is more concerned about survival. Then they hear something above them. A large creature flies overhead. The minions duck. James watches it disappear into the distance. The researcher was right. This world has its own ecosystem. The creatures are not simply monsters. They have homes. Families. Territories. A complete society. James begins to wonder how humans could ever have believed these creatures were nothing more than experiments. The deeper they travel, the more evidence they find. There are structures built by the creatures. Paths. Shelters. Places where they gather. This is not a wild environment. It is a civilization. And Gumi is part of it. Eventually, they reach a valley. The minions stop. They see Gumi. The creature is standing among a large group. James smiles. Gumi sees them. It immediately runs toward them. The minions rush forward. The reunion is emotional. Gumi embraces the minions. James watches from a distance. For a moment, everything feels safe. But Gumi quickly becomes serious. It points toward the mountains. Then toward the sky. Then it makes a motion that James recognizes. Fear. Gumi is warning them. The danger is nearby. The creatures around them begin moving. Some are leaving the valley. Others are gathering. James asks what is happening. Gumi cannot explain with words, but its actions are clear. Something is approaching. The ground begins shaking. The creatures become nervous. A distant roar echoes through the mountains. The minions freeze. James looks toward the horizon. A dark shape appears. At first, it is difficult to understand what they are seeing. Then the shape rises higher. It is enormous. Far larger than any creature they have encountered. The researcher called it a presence. Now James understands why. This is not simply another monster. It looks almost like a force of nature. The creatures begin fleeing. Gumi grabs one of the minions. James tells everyone to move. They run toward a group of rock formations. The massive creature continues approaching. Its movement changes the landscape around it. Trees bend. Ground cracks. Creatures disappear into caves. The minions hide behind rocks. James watches. The creature does not appear interested in them. It is searching for something. Gumi watches it carefully. Then Gumi points toward James. James does not understand. Gumi points toward the gateway. James suddenly realizes. The creature can sense the connection between worlds. It knows humans have entered. That means James may have brought the danger with him. He looks at the minions. They are safe for now. But the gateway is still open. If the creature follows their energy, it could reach the human world. James realizes they need to close the gateway. But they cannot do that yet. They are too far away. And the gateway equipment is on the other side. The only way back is through the same opening. James looks toward the horizon. The gateway is beyond the mountains. They have to reach it before the creature does. The group begins moving. Gumi leads them through hidden paths. The creatures of this world appear to recognize Gumi. Some help them, others avoid them. The journey becomes a race against time. Behind them, the massive creature continues moving. It is getting closer. James begins realizing that the creature may not be trying to attack them. It may be following the gateway. If they close it, perhaps the creature will lose its path. But if they fail, the human world could become exposed. The minions begin helping with the journey. They climb. They carry equipment. They scout ahead. For once, their usual chaos becomes useful. They are small enough to move through spaces James cannot. They discover hidden routes. They find food. They warn the group when danger is nearby. James starts trusting them completely. As they approach the mountains, the environment becomes darker. The air feels heavier. Gumi slows down. James asks what is wrong. Gumi points ahead. There is a massive structure built into the mountain. It appears to be ancient. The creatures avoid it. James realizes the gateway may have been connected to this place all along. They enter. Inside, the walls are covered with symbols. Some are identical to the markings they found on Earth. That means the connection between the two worlds goes back much further than anyone knew. James runs his hand over one of the symbols. He realizes humans did not discover the creatures by accident. Someone had been communicating with this world long before modern science. Perhaps the first researchers were simply continuing an ancient connection. The minions explore the chamber. One of them finds a strange object. It looks like a piece of the gateway technology. James takes it. The object begins glowing. Gumi reacts. The entire chamber lights up. A projection appears. It shows the history of the two worlds. Humans. Creatures. Communication. Then fear. Then the experiments. James watches as the projection reveals the truth. The creatures were never trying to invade Earth. They were trying to escape something. Something that appeared long before the experiments. The massive creature outside is not the source. It is one of the creatures running from the source. James finally understands. The danger is deeper. Something else exists beyond this world. Something even the monsters fear. And the gateway may have accidentally connected 3 worlds instead of 2. The human world, the creature world. And something much darker. The projection suddenly changes. A shadow appears. It moves toward the creatures. They run. The image ends. The image ends. The chamber continues shaking, and James realizes they cannot stay there much longer. Whatever is approaching is getting closer, and the creatures outside are already fleeing from the mountain. Gumi looks toward the entrance. The minions move closer to James. Nobody needs to say it. They have to leave. James picks up the strange device they found inside the chamber. The object is still glowing, but now the light is changing. It is no longer steady. It pulses faster every few seconds. James believes it is reacting to the presence of whatever is approaching. He looks at the symbols on the walls. There are hundreds of them. Some describe the gateway. Others appear to describe different creatures. But one symbol keeps appearing again and again. A circle surrounded by several broken lines. James remembers seeing the same symbol in the old research documents. He finally understands what it represents. A warning. The original researchers had discovered this symbol and misunderstood it. They thought it represented the gateway itself, but it actually represented what was beyond it, the unknown force. James tells the others they need to get the information back to Earth. If the original researcher is still alive, he may be able to explain the rest. They start moving through the chamber. The minions search for another exit. Gumi leads them deeper into the mountain. At first, James wonders why they are going farther inside when they should be trying to escape. Then he sees another passage. It leads downward. The walls are covered with more symbols. The deeper they go, the older the markings become. Eventually, they reach a massive underground chamber. At its center is something that looks like a frozen gateway. Unlike the machine on Earth, this structure appears to have been created naturally. James walks around it. There are no wires. No control panels. No modern technology. Yet the structure is clearly connected to the same energy. James realizes the original researchers did not create the gateway. They discovered a natural connection and tried to reproduce it. That explains why their machines were unstable. They were trying to copy something they did not understand. The minions look at the structure with fascination. One of them touches it. The entire chamber lights up. James tells him to move away, but it is already too late. A projection appears in the air. This time, it is different. It shows the history of the creature world. The creatures existed long before humans discovered them. They lived peacefully. They developed their own communities. Then something appeared. At first, it was only a small disturbance. Creatures began disappearing. Entire areas became empty. The survivors moved farther away. They tried to understand what was happening, but whatever was attacking them could not be seen. It did not behave like a creature. It behaved like an expanding force. Where it appeared, everything disappeared. The creatures began calling it something represented by the warning symbol. James watches silently. The projection shows the creatures discovering a way to escape. They found the natural connection between worlds. They did not want to conquer another world. They wanted somewhere safe. The first contact with humans was peaceful. The creatures communicated. The humans listened. For a while, everything worked. Then the experiments began. The humans wanted more. They wanted to understand the connection. Then they wanted to control it. Eventually, they created machines to open the gateway whenever they wanted. That attracted attention. The unknown force noticed the connection, and the creature world became even more dangerous. James finally understands the real tragedy. The humans were not the only ones responsible. The creatures were desperate. The researchers were curious, but both sides underestimated what was waiting beyond their understanding. The projection disappears. James looks at Gumi. The creature looks exhausted. Then the mountain shakes violently. A deep roar echoes through the tunnels. The minions panic. James grabs the device. They run. Gumi leads them toward another passage. Behind them, part of the chamber collapses. Dust fills the air. James realizes they are running out of time. They finally reach the surface. The creature world has changed. The sky is darker. Strange clouds are forming over the mountains. Creatures are moving in every direction. Some are heading toward the gateway. Others are fleeing. James realizes that the unknown force has already begun affecting this world. They need to close the gateway before it gets worse. The path to the gateway is blocked. A massive section of rock has collapsed. James looks around for another route. Gumi suddenly points toward the mountain. There is a narrow passage. It is barely large enough for James. The minions easily fit. They move through. The tunnel leads to a higher section of the mountain. From there, James can see the gateway in the distance, but something is standing between them and the opening. The massive creature they saw earlier. It is wounded. It appears exhausted. James slowly approaches. The creature does not attack. Instead, it looks toward the gateway, then toward James. Gumi moves forward. The two creatures communicate. James realizes the creature wants them to continue. It knows the gateway must be closed, but it also knows something else. The unknown force is approaching the gateway. If the connection remains open, it will eventually find a way through. James asks Gumi if they can stop it. Gumi makes a gesture. Not alone. James looks at the minions. They understand. They will have to work together. The gateway is surrounded by strange energy. The equipment they brought from Earth is reacting. James places the device into the central mechanism. Nothing happens. He tries again. Still nothing. Then he remembers the old footage. The minions' voices. The resonance. James asks them to sing. The minions stare at him. Then one begins. Another joins. Soon, the entire group is making the strange sounds they used during the original experiment. The gateway responds. Light spreads across the structure. The opening begins forming, but instead of creating a doorway to Earth, it creates a connection to something else. James sees darkness. Not a landscape, not creatures, just darkness. And then two enormous shapes appear inside it. The unknown force has noticed them. The minions stop singing. James tells them to continue. The gateway begins destabilizing. The force moves closer. The massive creature outside roars. Other creatures join. Suddenly, the entire valley is filled with sound. James realizes what is happening. The creatures are responding to the minions. Their voices are combining. The resonance becomes stronger. The gateway begins closing. The unknown force pushes against it. The structure shakes. James struggles to keep the device in place. The minions continue singing. Gumi joins them. The massive creature adds its voice. The sound becomes overwhelming. The gateway begins collapsing. For a moment, James thinks it is working. Then the device cracks. Energy bursts from the structure. James is thrown backward. The minions scatter. The gateway remains open. The unknown force is still there. James looks at the broken device. They have failed. Or so he thinks. The massive creature approaches the gateway. It stands directly in front of the opening. Then several other creatures join it. They form a barrier. James realizes what they are doing. They are holding the force back. They are giving the minions time. James grabs the damaged device. He tells the minions to keep singing. They begin again. This time, James understands the rhythm. He joins them. His voice is not as strong, but it adds another layer. The gateway begins responding. The creatures continue holding the barrier. The darkness inside the opening becomes smaller. The force pushes harder. The creatures refuse to move. James realizes that they are sacrificing themselves to close the gateway. He does not want that, but there is no other choice. The minions continue. The light becomes brighter. The opening begins shrinking. One by one, the creatures disappear from view. The massive creature remains until the very end. Gumi cries out. The creature looks at Gumi. Then it turns toward the darkness. The gateway closes. Silence. The mountain becomes still. James drops the broken device. The minions stop singing. Everyone looks at the place where the gateway once existed. It is gone, but something feels different. The air is calmer. The sky begins clearing. The creatures that remain start emerging from hiding. Gumi looks around. The massive creature is gone. James does not know whether it survived. He hopes it did. They begin walking away from the mountain. The minions are exhausted. James is exhausted. But they have achieved what they came to do. The gateway is closed. The unknown force cannot cross. At least, that is what James believes. Then he notices something. The warning symbol on the device is still glowing. The gateway may be closed, but the energy has not disappeared completely. James looks at the symbol. He realizes that closing the gateway may not have ended the connection. It may have only weakened it. He looks at Gumi. Gumi looks worried. Then the ground beneath them vibrates. Not strongly, just enough to be noticed. James stops. Everyone becomes silent. A faint sound comes from beneath the mountain. It sounds almost like a heartbeat. Once. Then again. James realizes the unknown force may not have been destroyed. They may have only closed the door. And if something is still on the other side, it may eventually find another way out. The minions gather around James. He looks toward the distant gateway location. They came to this world searching for answers. They found the truth. But the truth is far more frightening than they expected. The creatures were never the enemy. The gateway was never the real danger. The real danger is whatever waits beyond it. And now James has one final problem. He has to get everyone back to Earth before someone else discovers how to open the gateway again.